The NBA trade deadline has come and gone, and like with another year, there were winners and losers from this frenzy. We saw a total of 27 players traded on Wednesday and Thursday as some contenders got stronger, and some teams decided to go in rebuilding mode as they looked to clear up cap space for the big free agency period in 2019. With that being the case, the large amount of player movement across the league has made a significant shift in the odds to win the 2019 NBA Finals for certain franchises, as some moves vaulted teams up the list while others saw teams come crashing back down to earth. Previous odds, 90/1. The Miami Heat were a playoff team last season, but they're still waiting to see if a big part of that team will be returning in Dwayne Wade. Wade enjoyed a very successful season after returning to Miami at the trade deadline. A great deal of Miami's success could also depend on if Hassan Whiteside bounces back from a season in which he struggled and didn't receive steady minutes at times. Previous odds, 80/1. The Minnesota Timberwolves pushed all their chips in when they acquired Jimmy Butler back on draft night in 2017. However, Butler turned down a 4-year contract extension earlier this summer and ultimately forced a trade to the Philadelphia 76ers, which dashed the optimism that some had for this Minnesota team entering the season. Previous odds, 80/1. Kemba Walker has been one of the surprise stories of the early portion of the 2018-19 campaign, as he has put the Charlotte Hornets on his back by proving he is one of the game's most lethal scorers. While it could be tough for Walker to keep this pace up for the remainder of the year, he has done more than enough to start the season for his team to be considered among the possible contenders for a title. Previous odds, 45/1. The New Orleans Pelicans had an all-star front court in the form of Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins. After rupturing his Achilles last season, Cousins was forced to miss the remainder of the year and ultimately signed a 1-year deal with the Golden State Warriors. Then, as we all now know, Davis made it clear he would not sign an extension with the team and requested a trade, which dashed whatever hopes this team had for competing for a title. Previous odds, 70/1. The Indiana Pacers came out of nowhere and took the Eastern Conference by storm last season. However, despite their strong start to the 2018-19 campaign, the injury to Victor Oladipo has ruined whatever chances Indiana had to surprise the teams at the top in the East and contend for a title. Previous odds, 60/1. The Portland Trail Blazers put up an absolute dud in the opening round of the postseason in 2018 and were swept by the New Orleans Pelicans. The Trailblazers lost Ed Davis and Shabazz Napier in free agency and didn't really make any worthwhile additions at the deadline outside of taking a flyer on Skal Labissiere. This could be the last chance for the Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum backcourt to do some damage in the playoffs. Previous odds, 45/1. The Kawhi Leonard saga finally came to a close this summer when the San Antonio Spurs traded their all-star forward and Danny Green to the Toronto Raptors in exchange for DeMar DeRozan and Jakob Poeltl. While fans and pundits alike had their doubts entering the year, DeRozan, LaMarcus Aldridge and Greg Popovich have found a way to keep this franchise in contention in a competitive Western Conference. Previous odds, 22/1. The Los Angeles Lakers landed the best player in the world in the form of LeBron James. Unfortunately, they swung and missed in their attempt to pry Anthony Davis away from the New Orleans Pelicans, which led to their championship odds taking a hit. Previous odds, 35/1. The Utah Jazz upset the Oklahoma City Thunder in the opening round of the postseason. Donovan Mitchell became one of the more talented rookies that the NBA has ever seen and led the Jazz all season long. The Jazz are a young team that turn things around down the stretch and be a top-half team in the Western Conference. Previous odds, 35/1. The Denver Nuggets definitely could be one of the more underrated teams in the NBA this season. Denver added Isaiah Thomas, who should debut soon, and resigned Will Barton to join a backcourt that already includes Gary Harris and Jamal Murray. The Nuggets barely missed the postseason last year, and it's hard to imagine that happening again with a player of Thomas's caliber coming off the bench. Previous odds, 50/1. Aside from the Los Angeles Lakers, it's hard to find a team in the NBA that improved more than the Oklahoma City Thunder since the offseason. The team parted ways with Carmelo Anthony while also adding Dennis Schroeder and Nerlens to bolster their bench in addition to re-signing Paul George. Schroeder's presence has taken a great deal of pressure off of Russell Westbrook from a ball handling and scoring perspective, as he has been a fantastic fit in OKC. Previous odds, 12/1. The Houston Rockets were just one win away from reaching the NBA Finals, but a Game 5 injury to Chris Paul derailed those hopes. In the off-season, the organization stayed committed to their winning ways as they resigned Chris Paul and Clint Capella. However, injuries to those two have forced James Harden to do, essentially, everything on the offensive end for a good chunk of the season. Previous odds, 25/1. The Milwaukee Bucks had a solid off-season in which they signed Ersan Ilyasova and Brook Lopez to bolster their front court. However, even with the Cleveland Cavaliers losing LeBron James to the Los Angeles Lakers in free agency, the Bucks still weren't viewed as a top-flight team in the conference due to the emergence of the Toronto Raptors, Boston Celtics, and Philadelphia 76ers. However, a strong performance at the trade deadline coupled with an MVP-level season by Giannis Antetokounmpo has changed that. Previous odds, 16/1. The Philadelphia 76ers are one of the most exciting young teams in the NBA. Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and company won a postseason series, but were handled by the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference semifinals, after acquiring Jimmy Butler at the beginning of the season and then swinging for the fences by trading for Tobias Harris at the deadline. Philadelphia is a legitimate threat to win the East. Previous odds, 9/1. The Toronto Raptors made a huge splash this summer when they traded for Kawhi Leonard. The Raptors found themselves being dominated by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference semifinals and certainly have made big changes since then. If the addition of Marc Gasol at the deadline pays dividends for the Raptors, Toronto could be on their way to their first appearance in the NBA Finals. Previous odds, 7/1. The Boston Celtics overcame the losses of Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward and were just one win away from the NBA Finals. Now Irving and Hayward are back and the Celtics could be primed for another deep postseason run. It's likely going to be a four-horse race in the East between Boston, Philadelphia, Milwaukee and Toronto, with the Celtics standing a good chance to come out on top. Previous odds, 20/33. The Golden State Warriors have won back-to-back NBA titles and certainly didn't need to improve their roster in the offseason. However, they did just that with the signing of DeMarcus Cousins. It's hard to imagine many teams being able to give the Warriors a run for their money in a 7-game series.